If you have an outline and you follow it faithfully, exactly like the outline says to do it, then when you're done with the script, you will have written the script of an outline.
Hey, you just heard a snippet of the interview I did with Jim Oles, the writer of Fight Club. This is just one interview, a part of the Behind the Curtain membership that's coming on May 18th. To get more details on how you can get access to exclusive content like this, sign up for the email newsletter at behindthecurtainfilm.com. Enjoy the video.
So oddly enough, people think of writing as dialogue, and to me, writing is structure. Dialogue is the cherry on top. The cherry on top does not support the ice cream sundae. It's a delicious little added thing, but the real storytelling, the real structuring, that to me is the hard part of writing, building the scaffolding, the skeleton of the story, if you will.
For a long time, I tried to think out everything in the story, even though I know things would completely change as I go on. However, now I've realized that it doesn't do me much good to think too much past the middle. I mean, I might know where I want to go. I mean, I write genre pieces, so you have an idea what the third act's going to be, and Kill Bill, I guess she'll probably kill Bill at the end. But, a genre movie, you think you know where you're going, and you're probably right, and you have an idea of how you might want the ending to end as for both a movie and for an audience. But for the most part, you can kind of work out more or less what's going to get you to the middle. But to think beyond that is kind of silly, because by the time you get to the middle when you've actually been writing it, well, it's a different story now. It's a different thing now. Now you are the characters. You know the characters. Things that you could never have known before you started writing are now, they're in your blood. It's like this entire, there is a mythology to my movies to some degree or another. And that mythology is delivered as I write. And I might have a checklist of things that I might want to do during the course of the time, but some of them, become irrelevant as you go on. And when other ones take their place, and some things that you thought could have been a big deal, well, they are a big deal. And some things maybe half the reason you wanted to write it. By the time you get to where that would happen, it's for something else. It's not for this. But by the time you get to the middle, that's where you want to be. You want to be this expert. You want to be in the middle of the story. You want to know who these people are. And now, with all this knowledge, now you figure out where you want to go for the second half. I'm trying to write to that spot where I don't know what's going to happen. I'm trying to get to that. I'm trying to get off that blueprint. And I'm trying to get to that place where now the characters are telling me and the characters are exciting me.
I'd be being disingenuous with you to say that I kind of can construct a story. I mean, I never feel like I know how to construct the story, except just like, that's a great way, what you just said, like, dumping things on a table and like spreading them around like that, for sure. And hopefully getting lucky enough to kind of get enough things going in a row that feels like something worth doing, something worth telling, something worth going to shoot.
I open up a final draft, and I write about a page of story beats, which would be single lines. So, spaceship on the way to the sun, 7 characters or 8, or I can't even remember how many there are. So it goes on. And just single lines, and the lines are the basic beats of the story. And when I've got to the end, I sort of take the cursor up to the top of the page. So I've got about a page of lines. I take the cursor back up to the top of the page, and I write the first scene. And as I reach story beats, I delete them. So eventually, the script is getting longer, and the story beats list, which is only a page, is getting shorter. Eventually, I delete the last line, and at that point, I've got a full script, and that's it. So that's a first draft, and it will be crap. But that's okay, because I know that there's a couple of things I get from that. One is you've got something to work with, and it's getting to that point that's often the hardest bit.
You read something, I can't remember who the quote is from, that enormous dust, enormous dust? That influence dust. Yes. That enormous dust influence.
See, that's an example of creative, some sort of syntax.
That enormous dust influence Lee. Somebody said that if the author doesn't know where the story is going, the audience can't possibly know.
I write really structurally. I have to start. I spend the first big chunk of time just working in little notebooks, and all I do is I draw like arcs and split them out into like sequences. I need to basically be able to see the whole plot in my head before I can sit down and actually start writing, or I'll get lost in the weeds. So I plan and plan and plan and plan, and this was like that, only more so. This was even more crucial for me to have the whole thing mapped out. But then you actually get into it, and as you guys who are writers, you know, you get into it, and no matter how much you plan, you know, it's like you plan out your map through the forest, looking at like the map in your cozy living room, and then you get in there and you're actually hacking through the forest, and you figure out stuff doesn't work, and you figure out new paths, and so yeah, it's kind of a mixture, I guess.
I don't outline. I say that. I definitely don't outline before I start writing. There is a moment when I do outline, but it's only after I have a great deal of material. I find when I outline before I write, it's the fastest way to kill all my ideas. I can't. Somehow it makes everything quite literal for me.
I've never outlined before. I use index cards. It just kind of organizes my mind. I've never index carded the whole movie because I don't think I've ever, at the point when I've started writing a screenplay, known everything that there is to know about the whole movie. I've figured out how it's going to start, and I have some other things along the way. But it's kind of like walking in the dark with a flashlight. You can really only see as far ahead of you as the light goes.
I think rules are great if you're in trouble, and if you're not in any trouble with what you're writing, they're absolutely useless and possibly worse than useless. It may happen that every script has the characters established by page 10, and it may not. I don't think there's any reason to be thinking about that when you're trying to write a script. And it may be that every successful script has a reversal and half 2/3 of the way through, and another one 1/3 of the way through. I don't know. It's not really. I don't see what you're gonna. I don't think that kind. I think that kind of thing. I think every time I read a script and it goes off, it's because at that point the script is trying to be like a script, and it's not. And it's at that exact moment when it loses its individuality and its interest.
I mean, what I do is I do a very detailed step outline of the story, and then you break it down to like all the scenes that need to be there. I go and I put in all the scene settings of every scene, so I know where you are and at what time, you know. And actually, it's good to figure out the rhythm of day and night in movies. I mean, Little Miss Sunshine is 3 days. Most films are like a few days, and you want this rhythm between day and night. You don't want to be cutting from day to day, you know, from one day to the next day. You want to be moving up and down. And so I'll go through and just do all the log lines, or not log lines, all the scene lines, slug lines, and just put them in. And you can even see at that point if there's an action sequence that's too long, or if there's something that there could be another scene in here. And once you got your 50 slug lines or whatever they are, your 50 scenes, then you just can go ahead and put your dialogue into them. And what I've started doing at Pixar now is doing what I call a sequence outline, which is you break the film down into 15 or 20 sequences. And I do it on 4 pieces of paper. So I do the first act on 1 piece of paper, which is the title of the sequence and then what happens in it. And usually you have 5 or 6 sequences in your first act, and then the second page is the second quarter of the film, which will take you to your midpoint. The third page is the third quarter, and then the last page. And then you have your whole film is on 4 pages, but it breaks down it by act, at the end of the first page, you get to the end of the first act. And you can just look at stuff, and because it's broken down by sequence, you can figure out, this right here can go over here. You're able to visually see the whole film. And I find that really helpful in terms of moving stuff around. But with index cards, I always feel like it's just too much. It's just clutter everywhere, on the floor of your apartment. And it's better to just be able to put 4 sheets of paper in front of you and figure out why something isn't working or not. I'm such a strong believer in knowing where you're going before you start out, that hopefully once and inevitably things change, that's what things change, but hopefully you'll at least get to the end of your first draft, with a semblance of what you started out trying to do.
It's a big deal for me. I can usually look at an outline, which is usually about, it's like I'll be able to just have scene headings, and her in her office or something like that, where she realizes this or gets the first message or whatever it is, and that will go for about 3 pages, of that, and I can usually start to see the rhythms and see what's wrong with the piece, and what needs to be thought more about.
We would sit in front of a cork board 3 feet by 5 feet with a big thing of thumbtacks and a big thing of index cards and a whole bunch of Sharpie magic markers. And we'd sit there and we'd say, okay, what's the teaser? And you build it brick by brick. Each card represents a plot beat. Not necessarily a scene, but 3 or 4, 6, 8 cards might represent one scene. And by the end of it, you filled up this entire 3 foot by 5 foot corkboard with a teaser and the 4-act structure. Sitting there together or alone. Alone is much harder still. And figuring out each plot beat is essentially the good analogy, I suppose, is a bunch of engineers sitting around on their drafting tables or their communal drafting table and drawing the design, drawing the architectural drawings for a skyscraper. Then you got to go build a skyscraper, which is a huge amount of man hour and labor and all of that. But you can't build that skyscraper unless you got the architectural blueprints to begin with. And to us, the actual sitting down and writing it's kind of carefree compared to the breaking, because I've got this outline. I've got these index cards, and I know, what happens next. So the writing is an important part of it, but it's not the hardest part, and it's not, to me, the most crucial part.